I would say my best investment moment is
Mm,
really investing in myself,
mm,
whether that's through courses, whether that's through a mentor or a coach, whether
yeah.
that's just, taking the risk and building a business. The level of, I suppose, development that you would receive from making
Hmm.
those mistakes, from failing at business, from, starting a business, from all those things, like, is invaluable.
Welcome to the Bricks and Banks podcast, where real estate meets real wealth. Whether you're building from the ground up or stacking your paper to the ceiling, Steph breaks down property power plays and money moves you can act on. From first-time buyers to seasoned investors, this podcast is your blueprint for financial freedom through property, investment, and business. Subscribe now. It's time to build your future. This is Bricks and Banks with Steph.
And we are live. Hello, everyone. Welcome to another amazing edition of Bricks and Bank with Steph. I am your host, Stephanie. With me today is a man of many hats. I would say so. And it's a man that is revolutionizing real estate technology using blockchain technology. I have Ricardo Johnson with me today, and he's the founder and CEO of Oasis Real Estate Investments and Financial Technology. So join me in welcoming Ricardo Johnson. Yay.
No, thank you for having me, Stephanie.
And Ricardo is joining us all the way from where? From
Barcelona.
Spain,
Yeah.
Barcelona, Spain. How's the weather over there?
Today is actually pretty nice. No,
Nice. I think in London is also good. Well, it was rainy. We had a bit of rain today, but yeah, fairly
normal.
it's been normal. Apart from the occasional. So Ricardo, I can see your shirt. You're wearing the Oasis tag shirt. So can you tell us a bit about the company?
Yeah, so started it just over a year ago and
Wow.
been building the platform since then. And essentially,
Yeah.
we're a tokenization platform. So it's just a marketplace to
Hmm.
access global real estate opportunities so you can fractionally own them.
Okay. Can you just share a bit about yourself? Let us know your background. How did you stumble upon tokenization and fractional? Everything is just like I've never heard it before. But
Really?
like I
Okay.
said, you're revolutionizing real estate investment, and I'm all for it.
Yeah, so I started in property in Birmingham about 8 years ago. And
Wow.
at that time I focused on being an inventory clerk. That's where I
Mm,
actually started my journey, and over the years it's kind of built up over time. After that I started to manage short-term rentals. So this is around, I suppose, 2017, 2018. And at this time, Airbnb's market was like taking off, and all landlords wanted to, change their properties into short-term rentals. So I was able to help them manage their properties, help them, find investments to build their portfolio. And really, that's what I've been doing for the past 8 years. When I stumbled across blockchain technology, this is when I started to invest in crypto, essentially,
crypto.
and
Yeah.
NFTs. I was introduced into smart contracts and how you can use it to, I suppose, not just tokenize, real estate, but any real world assets, essentially. And from then, I decided to create my own project, which allowed me to tokenize some of the property deals that I was sourcing. And I built that over 2 years. And I suppose from the experience and I suppose the lessons that I learned from doing it that way, that's what
Yeah.
sparked the idea to build out the full platform of Oasis.
Wow. From where we're standing, you're the first person to ever do it. Like, I know you have mentors. Did you have mentors along the line, or you just created this whole system yourself?
Well, I'm definitely not the first to do this but it's not, I suppose,
Yeah.
popular amongst,
Yes.
I suppose, just normal, property investors. It's
Mm,
really quite niche in it's mainly institutions that, take part in like tokenized projects in general.
yeah.
But it's actually now starting to, gain momentum for the wider audience. So in terms of mentors, my mentors wasn't necessarily, blockchain based. They're just, general business mentors that just, supported me along the way. But since I started to build, in blockchain, um, there's a plethora of, people who have experience that's, come alongside me and been able to give me pointers and open a few doors for me, which allowed the transition to be much easier. It hasn't been an easy journey, but that's made it a lot easier.
Oh, great. So do you like have like a community of people or a community of how would I put it, of investors that are buying into the blockchain tokenization right now?
Yeah, so when I launched my first project,
Hmm.
I built a small community
Okay.
there. Didn't
Yeah.
necessarily transition, like didn't necessarily transition into the new community, but
Hmm.
we haven't actually launched Oasis yet. It's
Oh,
launching in
okay.
May. But
Nice.
since then we built out a waiting list, so we have just over like 900 investors who have signed up,
Wow.
mainly US based, who are looking to take part in our projects essentially.
Well, so essentially, can you just give me a background? How does that work? Are you leveraging, because I know you have multiple real estate businesses. So are you leveraging on those real estate businesses to tokenize the real estate investments, or are you delving into a whole new market essentially?
Yeah, it's a whole new market, I
Okay.
suppose. So we primarily focus on luxury resort properties. So these
Mm-hmm.
are developments that are built within emerging markets. You're talking Costa Rica, you're talking Zanzibar, Bali, Thailand, Dubai, for example. So these are over the past like 5 years. These are
Yeah.
markets that's blown up since then essentially. So we focus on
Okay.
those regions. Places that got high tourism. So it still connects with what I've got my experience in the short term rental market. It's just
Hmm.
more on a global scale now.
Yeah, and you're giving people access to own fractional shares of these
Exactly.
properties. Oh, okay, that makes sense.
Exactly.
So, what was the turning point that made you realize that blockchain and tokenization were the future of real estate investment?
So I suppose just my experience in, buying crypto, like
Hmm.
the ability to essentially invest within minutes is, unparalleled, especially unless you're buying, shares. But when you compare
Yeah.
it to buying property, you're talking,
Mm-hmm.
months. By the time you actually put your offer in, your offer is accepted. By the time you get
Yeah.
your keys, you're talking, 3, 4, 5, even 6 months. And having to do that multiple times is, I mean, I suppose you get used to it, but I feel like it's unnecessary, really.
Yeah.
So what I decided to do was, we have technology there. The assets, already exist essentially. So
Mm-hmm.
why should it take 6 months for me to buy that? I should actually be able to see the property, assess the deal and be able to invest within minutes like everything else. So I think when it comes to, the digitization of assets, property is
Mm-hmm.
probably, the last one that hasn't actually transitioned over fully yet.
Sure.
We're definitely getting there, but
Yeah.
what my job is to do is try to, you know, be a part of that journey and bring as many as I can over.
Amazing. I'm going to ask you a two-part question because I'm very curious. And I want a lot of my listeners are first time buyers, first time investors in real
Okay.
estate. So, for someone hearing about real estate tokenization for the first time, how would you explain its real world benefits? That's one question. And how is the real estate tokenization different from real estate investment trust REITs? So, someone
Okay.
could just do a REIT on the stock market. So, how is this any different from just investing in the stock market?
Yeah, it's a great question. I suppose for your
Hmm.
for your first part,
Yeah.
I suppose to your audience, if they're, first time buyers, first time investors, the main benefit for tokenization or even fractional ownership is accessibility, really. Um, I suppose in the UK, if you want to buy a property, a rental property, in fact, you're talking, 25% down as a deposit before you
Uh-huh.
can even, access that property. So it depends on where you are in the country, it can add up, if you have to at least have what, £50,000 to, be able to get a rental property. Then you
Yeah.
have to, find a tenant, manage that tenant, collect your rent. And at the end of the year, you may end up with, 6, 7% yield. I mean, it's not bad. It's great. But for the costs that you actually have to put up front, it's
The
not
cost
really
and the
worth it.
efforts. Yeah.
Exactly.
Yeah,
It's
the
not
efforts.
really worth it.
Mm-hmm.
And then is how long would it really take you to save up 50,000 to
Sure.
get in the market? So it's not really accessible,
Mm,
especially for young people like us.
yeah.
However, with tokenization, you can now take 5,000, 10,000 pounds and start investing and earn yield. So
Mm,
you can get even, better yields than 7, 8%, depending on
mm,
obviously what platform you use and what properties you're investing in. But it makes it easily accessible so anyone can start investing. Um, and I suppose to your next question that was on the REITs.
great. Yeah.
So REITs is, I suppose REITs would be the equivalent to tokenization or fractional ownership essentially, because you have not necessarily direct ownership, but you could still invest your money into, property assets. So you could still get the capital appreciation, and obviously they pay out dividends within that fund. So you could still get passive income from those investments. The main difference between, REIT and I suppose a tokenized property is that you
Yeah.
have no transparency. So
Mm,
when you invest into a REIT, you're buying a share within a particular fund, but
yeah.
that fund is managed by those general partners. You don't have any control over what assets or that they buy or sell within that fund. You're just,
Mm,
I won't say praying. Obviously, they are, qualified people, but
yeah.
you're hoping they're making the right decisions, and you're trusting them
Mm,
to obviously manage, that portfolio. You're just taking part and putting your money into that fund essentially for a
yeah.
yield. With a tokenized property, you can actually decide on what property you invest in. So let's say take Oasis for example. You sign up to Oasis and you've got, let's say, 10 different projects, all different parts of the world. You can go and review the developers. You can review the financial models on each on each property, and you can make a
Mm,
decision directly into, okay, I want to invest into this particular project. It could be because you may want to travel there one day and stay in that resort. You could, you might look at the yield and be, this is the best yield I can find on the platform. I want to invest here, but you have that full control and transparency that you don't
yeah.
get with a REIT.
Oh, okay, that makes a lot of sense. So what would you now say it's like the biggest, because I know you get to talk to different investors, you get to talk to different people about what you're doing. So what would you say so far is like the biggest misconception about tokenized real estate, and how do you address them?
Um, I think the biggest misconception is that it's complicated. And
Mm,
I get it. If you're not used to, if you've not owned any digital assets, if you don't own Bitcoin or, Ethereum or anything like that, maybe the barrier to entry in terms of, creating a wallet, understanding, digital ownership
mm,
could be a barrier, but
yeah.
it's actually the easiest way to do it, as opposed to traditional, investing in property. So I think that's the biggest misconception. And just for the sake of, everyone's got smartphones essentially. So you can create your own wallet, you can download your own wallet on the smartphone. You can, sign up and you can start investing, you know, whenever you want essentially. And it's just the learning curve is not as steep as people, perceive. Um, I suppose another misconception is that when you talk about crypto assets, people only look at the speculative part of it. So people don't really look at real world use cases. How can this technology be used?
Yeah.
What is actually backing these tokens essentially? And maybe
Mm-hmm.
because it's new, well, it's not necessarily new, but maybe because it's not top of mind when people think about crypto. But these products are out there. You have access to these type of opportunities.
Oh, okay. So money wise, what would you say like it's like the range for people, serious investors to get into tokenized real estate or like join your waiting list? How much should they like have in the bank to get into this field?
So for Oasis particularly, our minimum
Hmm.
investment is $10,000.
Hmm. Okay.
That's just for us. However, there are platforms that with $500 you can start investing, with $100 you can start investing.
Oh,
There's
okay.
Depending on what you're looking for, there's different platforms out there. So we position ourselves in the $10,000 range just to start off.
Yeah.
So, and for us, for us, that's probably the benchmark for, you know, a serious investment, because you're not looking at, or because it's property, for example. So
Mm-hmm.
let's say you can make 10% on your investment. If you
Yeah.
invest £100 and at the end of the year, you know, you make £10, it's not going to change your life, right? You still made a, you know, a
Sure.
great investment.
Yeah,
You
you
still
make
made 10% on your investment,
10%.
but in terms of what you can do with that 10% is not, you know, it's not going to make a difference in your life, essentially.
Yeah, and
However,
inflation will probably catch up with
exactly.
it.
Exactly. So, but
Yeah.
if that's now £10,000 and
Mm.
you've made £1,000 at the end, you know, over that year. So we pay out every quarterly. So that's actually something you can use. You can use that £1,000 to reinvest. You can use that £1,000. That's a holiday, you know, essentially.
Yeah.
That's a new phone. That's whichever. The point I'm making is, you know, it's still real estate you're talking about. So
Yeah.
it still takes a substantial investment to make it worthwhile for anybody, and to even make it valuable. You know,
Yeah.
a lot of people overlook these type of opportunities because you know, $100 or whichever the case may be is, you know, is not necessarily too good to be true, but it's not high enough to even have any value to them. So
Yeah.
we set our minimum at $10,000 to start off with.
Yeah. And I know you get a lot of pushbacks from people because everyone is already used to traditional real estate. I'm saving towards a down payment for my house. And I'll pay my mortgage over 30 years. That's what we've been primed for when it comes to real estate investing, and that's what works. So, what's the number one mindset shift you would say investors need to make to move from the traditional real estate path into the blockchain based industry?
I think I think it's probably slightly deeper than that. I think, for
Mm,
example, as you mentioned, you know, we're already primed from, especially in the UK, we're already primed from birth, essentially, to, you know, own a home. And you know, most people position that as, you know, their biggest investment, but I would argue it's not an investment at all. Owning a home is an actual purchase. It's not an investment. Although, yes, it's hedged against inflation, so it will go up over time. For
yeah.
example, yes, maybe one day you might be able to rent it out. You know, you can still sell it. You can, you know, increase your equity in the property. But
Mm,
most people buy a property to live in, to essentially live in there, right?
sure.
It's not an investment property.
Yeah.
Even like, for example, when they talk about first time buyers, they're not talking about first time investors. They say first time buyers. So the product itself is positioned for people to buy and use, not to buy as an investment. An investment property, a buy to let property, is a different ball game. So
Mm,
sorry to I've been off a bit, but to answer your question specifically, um it's about looking at, you know, for people who want to switch from, you know, traditional into blockchain, is really understanding that digital ownership is still
yeah.
real ownership. um
Mm,
Most people, I suppose, we'll say not the most people, but there are people who don't necessarily invest in stocks. You know what? Stocks, it's still digital ownership. You know, when
sure.
you log into your Vanguard, you know, app, or Hargreaves Lansdowne, whatever platform you use to invest in stock, you know, you're not issued, you're not given the actual share certificates itself when you buy those shares, right? You just have the number of shares, you know, how much you paid for it and the value, whatever. So you still have digital ownership of your
Mm,
portfolio. And it's the
mhm,
same thing when it comes to crypto. Exactly the same thing, but you have more control because you're given custody of it. You know, with Vanguard, for example, they have custody of those. You have access to see it and to, you know, buy and sell, but they have the
yeah.
custody. With crypto, you have the custody. So you have to understand, you know, the power of owning it yourself and possessing it yourself.
Okay. So going back to Oasis, you've positioned it as the leader in luxury real estate tokenization because I know you mentioned that for you guys, your set um start position is at $10,000, while there are other platforms that do like $100. You can buy your real estate at $1,000, but you guys have set yourself at $10,000. Why did you choose luxury properties and luxury areas such as Dubai and other European countries? And how does this strategy benefit investors?
So in terms of the luxury market, it's
Mm,
a bit more robust in regards to like fluctuations in general. So
okay.
as a whole, the idea is to build a portfolio with, high valued properties that are, um, built and developed, at that level. One, they're going to last longer. Two, they're going to
Mm,
withstand, a lot more fluctuations, and the value
yeah.
is always going to be high. In terms
Mm,
of the short-term rental market, there's always going to be a demographic of people who would travel regardless of
mm,
what's happening, if there's a recession or not. And
yeah.
these are the properties that they will be staying in, for their travel, essentially. And then we focus on the emerging markets. So there are some places in Europe which are still emerging, but the I think the biggest gains are in places where people are now traveling to. So when we think about what's happened over the past, 5 years with, you know, a lot more people are becoming, globalized. People are traveling the world,
Yeah. Digital
and
nomads.
exactly,
They're
exactly,
moving to Bali
exactly.
because of
So
the sun.
exactly. Where are they going? Right? They're going to those
Yeah.
places. So
Yeah.
those are the places we target. These are the places
Mm,
that people who are earning money, from the West essentially, but moving across to the East or wherever, parts of the
mm,
world where their money is much more powerful. They're now buying real estate, which are now boosting the prices. This is what we're capitalizing on essentially, and this trend's only growing and is only going to continue to grow. As more of us become digital nomads. I'm a digital nomad myself essentially, so
yeah.
I'm more people will
So
become digital nomads over time. So why not be involved in those markets?
yeah, that makes a lot of sense. And the stability and the fact that these areas are already prime destinations for tourism. So it just makes a lot of sense because it will continue to grow. The tourism market is just continue to go upscale. At least after COVID, everyone now wants to travel. So that's
Exactly.
before before another pandemic hits us, like, okay, I've checked out
But it's true.
10 countries off my list. So yeah, whatever.
Exactly. Exactly.
So what would you say is like the common mistake early investors make in this space and how can they avoid it?
Um, you mean in the space of tokenized real estate or just real estate in
Or
general?
even real estate in general, really, from your experience.
It's a tricky question, I suppose.
Hmm.
I wouldn't necessarily say it's a mistake, but
Okay.
I think where people go wrong, I think, is that people stay really localized when it comes to investing. So
Hmm.
traditionally, people like to invest, within half an hour of where they live. People like to have, be
Yeah.
hands on in case anything happens. They can drive
Yeah.
over there and, fix it or whatever the case may be. Um, which, you know, depending on where you live, like you're going to
Hmm.
miss out on really all the great opportunities that are there over the
Yeah.
world, essentially, if you're only focused on where you actually live, you know? Um, I think that's one mistake. In terms of like tokenized real estate, I think a mistake people make is maybe it's a bit biased coming from me, but they invest too small, you know?
Hmm.
And I mean, there's nothing wrong with investing of what you can afford to lose. Essentially, what you can afford to invest, it's still a risk regardless. So it makes sense. But back to my point that I was saying earlier, because of the type of returns you can get, it's not like, for example, if you're investing in Bitcoin and you're looking at one day a Bitcoin might be worth $1 million. That maybe 10, 20 years time is a different type of investment. This is a real world investment. So you're getting real world returns. So if you're only investing, $500, there's only so much you can make off $500 essentially. Um, so I think if people diving into the space, I think the best strategy would be to what you call like dollar cost average. So every month you would regularly invest. So, if you can
Hmm.
afford to invest, a couple £100 or a couple £1,000 per month, then
Hmm.
you can do that. And over time you build a vast portfolio,
Okay.
and that's when you can really get the real benefits from it.
Okay. And I know you mentioned for Oasis you're focused on luxury service. Was it the service accommodation
Yeah,
or
yeah,
resorts?
yeah, yeah.
Okay. So like what are the type of properties that's are in your portfolio? Is it just service accommodations and resorts, or there are hotels in it?
So it's a mix essentially. So
Mm,
when we're talking about service accommodation or
yeah.
short-term rentals,
Yeah.
we've got a project where it's apartments. So it's a resort, built apartments. They have their own rental scheme,
Mm,
in-house. They
okay.
have their own restaurants, etc. It's all there, which makes it a lot easier, for management and for development on their side. And then you have resorts which are like villa based. So you're investing
Okay.
into a collection
Yeah.
of villas. So essentially, what
Yeah.
we do, we partner with the developers. So let's say there's
Okay.
a beachfront resort. There's they're developing 50 villas.
Hmm.
2 bedroom, 3 bedroom, 4 bedrooms. Whichever the case may be, we would
Yeah.
then go in, we will take a few of those units and then we'll tokenize those. And then whoever's investing in those particular properties. So it all just depends, whether they're apartments, whether they're actual villas, or it's
Hmm.
part of a hotel. So we
Okay.
haven't we haven't secured any hotels as of yet.
Okay.
But yeah, it's many apartments and
Pipeline.
villas.
Okay. Okay, that makes sense. Um, so I know you would say you'll probably say join the waiting list, but for someone looking to invest in tokenized real estate today, what's the smartest entry points?
Um, yeah, I would definitely say Oasis is the it's the smartest entry point to get started. I would say do your research first.
Sure. Yeah.
Oasis is not the only marketplace where you can buy tokenized real estate.
Mm-hmm.
There's depend if you like, for example, commercial real estate. There's platforms you can buy commercial real estate. If you like,
Okay.
single family homes as your investment strategy, there's platforms where you can invest in single family homes. It all just
Mm,
depends on what you're looking for. The reason why we focus on the luxury resort sector is that
yeah.
we want to actually combine what we would call security and utility. So it's not just an investment product. It's not just a share. You're not just buying a token. You're not just buying a commodity. Essentially, you're actually buying something that gives you real life, benefits. So
Mm.
depending on how many tokens you hold, you can actually go and get complimentary stays within these resorts. So for people who like
Oh,
to travel
that
or
makes
people who like to
sense. Yeah.
invest, we can combine the two. Whereas other platforms, they don't
Yeah.
have that additional utility. It's literally just an investment.
Yeah.
But we thought it was, it's a much the technology is there to make it, to make it real. So why not add those benefits to it? So yeah, you can vote. When we spoke about, the REITs,
Yes.
once you've invested within, whichever project you invested in, each token you own comes with a vote. So if one day, let's say 5 years down the line, you feel that, we should sell this property, you can vote on to sell the property. You have control with the tokens that you hold. There's a secondary marketplace. So if you want to sell one day, you can list your tokens and sell it to someone else within the platform. Or if you want to buy it of someone else, you can go to the marketplace and buy those tokens off somebody else. So we're giving you the flexibility of that, which all platforms don't have. We're giving you the utility of being able to stay and visit these properties that you own. Other
Mm.
platforms, don't have that. And it just depends on what you're looking for, really.
Okay, so something just crossed my mind when we talked about serviced accommodations and resorts. Have you considered cruise ships? I know people actually spend 3 months on cruise boats and
Mhm.
ships. So have you ever considered adding that to your portfolio,
Um, Funnily
tokenizing that
enough,
area? Yeah.
the thought crossed my mind recently. It might have been a week and a half ago. You know,
Oh, okay.
I saw a
Rain.
video of a cruise ship, and I was just like, that's not actually bad. But
Yeah.
you can even do yachts, for example. In
True.
terms of like
Yeah.
short-term rental market,
Yeah.
yachts, traditionally are chartered. People charter
Yeah.
yachts, so there is a marketplace. I think eventually there will be tokenized yachts that you can go and invest in. We don't do it
Yeah.
yet, but I suppose my second thought when I thought about the cruise ships,
Yeah.
similar to the hotels. So I suppose a cruise ship is just like a floating, hotel essentially.
Hotel. Yeah.
And the main barrier to the hotel for me is the control aspect of it. So
Mm,
because it's already, let's say a hotel's already running, it's already a business,
yeah.
entity. If we were to invest, we're only investing in a share of that hotel. So let's say we buy, 10% of the hotel, 5% of the hotel, whatever the case may be. Um, we don't have control over, you know, what they do within that
Okay.
hotel.
Yeah.
Essentially,
Mm,
we don't have control over the management. We don't have control over, the expenses or anything like that. Which is why I was like, I think we might explore it one day, but in terms of our business model at the moment, we stick to the resort properties because it's easier for us to control it. If we want to sell that property, the apartment or the villa, we can put it on the market in that local area and we can sell that property. If we want to change the management, we can hire other operators in place to actually manage that property. So we still have some level of control over it. But yeah, I'm not opposed to the idea. Just haven't figured it all out yet.
okay. Okay. Talking about opportunities, what would you say is like the biggest wealth building opportunities in the tokenized real estate space right now? And over the next 3 to 5 years, and where should investors be looking at?
Just from my experience and my opinion,
Mm,
we mentioned it earlier about the emerging markets. I think that's for tokenized real estate. That's
yeah.
going to be, I think, the biggest opportunity. What's been interesting in places like Dubai,
Mm,
over the past 5 years, they've had upwards of 70% in capital appreciation. Which
yeah.
is very high. You're talking 14% per year just in capital. Like you don't really get that every day. So, you know, that market in itself is booming and really is the hub, I would say, for tokenized real estate.
Mm,
They're really, so when we're talking about, tokenized real estate, it's in the same vein as a REIT. So
yeah.
it's not direct ownership. Your name's not signed on the deed itself, on the property deed. You own a share of the company that owns that property, some people buy properties in their own name, some people buy it through companies. That's essentially how it works, direct and indirect. Where what Dubai is piloting now, testing out now, is actually putting those property deeds on the
Mm,
blockchain.
okay.
So no other country, around the world is actually putting the deeds on the blockchain yet. It's all done through how we do it, which is, SPVs, special purpose vehicles, companies
Yeah.
essentially, which buys and, acquires the actual assets itself. But being able to
Yeah.
do it on chain fully is a game changer overall. Now, eventually the rest of the world will catch up to that, but they're the country that's really spearheading. So I would say Dubai is like probably a great opportunity overall for tokenized real estate.
Okay. So I want to ask you a question I was asked. So a friend of mine asked me this question today, and I got thinking. So what would you say is the best place to invest in real estate right now? So he said, is it US markets, the UK markets, or Dubai, the Middle East markets? What would you say? I know you would come from a
It depends.
bias point. Okay.
I think it depends. Yeah, yeah. It's not.
Okay.
Sorry, I'm not very good at like black and white answers.
Yes,
It,
sure.
it it depends because one, it
Hmm.
depends how much money you have, how much are you
Uh-huh.
looking to invest.
Yeah.
Because there's opportunities all over the world. Whether you're in the US, you're in the UK, or you're in the Middle
Hmm.
East, there are opportunities. I think where it could be easier. Let's say I don't know. Let's say you have £100,000. Like that's all you have. Um, Even then it'll vary because it depends if you have access to finance. Can you get a bridging loan or can
Yeah.
you get a mortgage with that money? It depends. But for example, the opportunities that are there in Dubai at the moment is when you're buying off-plan developments,
Hmm.
you only have to put down a deposit. Let's say it's 10%. Say the property is 300,000, you only have to put down 30,000 now. It's not going to be complete until 2027. But what that means is over those 2 years, you can still sell that reservation essentially. So as that development, continues to be developed, those prices will increase. So you can get capital appreciation on the actual reservation. So before the property's even finished, you're able to sell that property and make money. So there are people who are doing that, and there are opportunities there. So that's like stuff you can do, less than 100,000. If you're talking, just pure. So I think that's probably an easy way. I'll say an easier way. It's not investment advice, but I'm just saying, in terms of what opportunities are out there. If you're doing something similar in the UK, you could take that money, you can put a deposit down on the property, you can renovate the property, and you can refinance it. So those opportunities ain't available all around the world, but definitely US and the UK, it's called I call it BRRR or BRRR model. With 100,000, with 100,000, you can do that. It just depends how hands-on you want to be, how much risk you want to take. But yeah, I think my answer is all three. You can make money in all three with 100,000.
Yeah. Still on the 100,000 example, how would you advise like a split between traditional and tokenized real estate for an investor?
It depends again. Yeah, I would say it depends. But for me personally, if I say I'm biased, I would put the whole 100,000 into tokenized real estate personally.
Yeah.
What I would caveat that with is that you don't necessarily have to put that whole 100,000 within one platform. You can, within the Oasis itself, you can diversify into different, geographical locations. You can split that 10,000, within 10 different locations if you wanted to. But you can also, maybe want to invest in 4 different locations. You might want to do commercial real estate and go to, buy tokenized commercial real estate. So you can spread it over, multiple platforms and, I suppose diversify your portfolio, diversify your risk overall. In terms of the benefits, having that flexibility, if you want to sell a traditional property, you're talking, 4 to 6 months for you once you put it on the market to actually get the sale. Majority of deals actually fall through. You might get an offer, but there's, a 60% chance that deal will still fall through. So it's like, where we are today, you don't have to go through those things anymore. There are ways that you can actually buy and sell within minutes. You can get much better yields. You can still get capital appreciation. You can have full control, full transparency of your actual, your portfolio, and you can diversify. You don't have to put that whole 100,000 into one investment property and hope that area continues to, develop over the years, and hope that the interest rates, don't increase too much. That's gonna,
That's another
price
one.
you out. Hope that the
Yeah.
regulations don't change too much, that, you don't have any rights as a landlord, and, et cetera, et cetera. There's ways you can, I'm not saying it's risk free in tokenized real estate, but, you have a lot more flexibility and choice.
Yeah, because with 100K, you make it down payments, you still cover the cost of you cover some legal costs, the solicitor costs, you cover some stamp duty costs. It's just a lot, and you're not even sure if your tenant is gonna bail on the rent next.
Yeah. Like as a landlord myself, it's like, it is a little piece of anxiety that's there every month that you're just praying that everybody actually pays, because the reality is, like, we have mortgages on this. You're not like all that money, unless you own the property outright, that all that money's not coming to you. You're using probably 90% of that money to pay the mortgage, right? So if they don't pay, you can't pay, or it's coming out of your pocket. So it's, yeah. And I mean, that risk is that's inherently, it's a property, right? So inherently that risk is always going to be there. And there's ways you can obviously solve that. People do, Airbnb their property rather than, rent it to tenants. People do, supported accommodation and rent it to the council. People do whatever, depends on what you want to do. But I find that like really what you want is to safely invest your money get your return, you know, either every month or every quarter. However, you want to get your return, and that's it. When you want to exit, if you ever want to sell, you can sell it. If you ever want to borrow on your assets, you borrow on your assets. You know, like,
Yeah.
that's, people don't want the headache. And really, that's what I wanted to create, a way to avoid all the headache.
Yeah, because when you eventually want to sell, you have to go through like a middleman or a deal, what they call a saucer,
Yeah,
a deal
yeah,
saucer that might still take out of your returns. So it's just crazy. Okay,
exactly.
tokenization actually makes a lot of sense because it cuts out all the headache. Okay, I want to do this for my K-pop enthusiasts because a lot of people are leaning into the Korean space because of the K-dramas, the K-pop, and everything. Is Oasis catering towards that area as well, or not yet?
Not yet, no. We're not close.
They're going to be angry with you guys.
No, it's not. It's not anything personal. Um,
Yeah,
it's not to say we can't. It's that, to be compliant, like, we have to register our tokens as securities. So we focus on the SEC, which is the US, you know, regulatory body. And one, that's the reason why we can only sell to, you know, accredited investors, etc., you know, US based investors. So that's what restricts us in that way. We could also sell, you know, to UK investors as well, under a different classification, but um, to the Asian markets is a different ball game altogether. And
yeah,
really, that's the main probably challenge around, you know, this business or this industry, is the regulatory nature of it.
regulations. Yeah,
So there are a lot of restrictions of how we can sell, who we can sell to, what checks that we need to do on each person, X, Y, and Z. You know,
hmm,
anti-money laundering checks. We have to do KYC, which is know your customer.
yeah.
I mean, it's not, you know, a huge barrier, but yeah, it means we're restricted overall.
Okay. Yeah, still on the regulation bits, many people worry about regulation in this space, like you rightly said. So, what's your take on the evolving legal landscape and how should investors navigate it?
Um, so depends on where you are and what platform you want to use to invest. You know, some
Hmm,
platforms, they won't let you invest, essentially, if you're not in the region that they can sell to. So,
okay.
um, but you would definitely want to make sure that the tokens that you're investing in are compliant, that they are actual registered securities. Um, because it gives you rights, it gives you, you know, protections under the law, under whatever, you know, legal body it's, you know, protected under, but it does give you protections under it. It also means that, you know, at least the people that you're, investing with are, you know, above board, I think. And then that's the main thing overall. um Regulations are becoming more clear now. You know,
Yeah.
over the past 2 years, I've seen so many, like, nations declare that, you know, they recognize digital assets as actual assets. You know,
Hmm,
so
yeah.
eventually, you know, the entire world will catch up. Places like China already have it, US already have it, you know, UK already have it, but other emerging markets would also start to catch up to that, which is good. I mentioned earlier about Dubai, you know, actually, you know, bringing the property deeds on chain. That there is, you know, game changer overall.
Yeah.
Um, so it's that, I think over the next 2 to 3 years, like, I think it'd be a much more smoother, you know, landscape overall, and a lot more clearer frameworks that people can use, which would make, you know, more people create platforms like Oasis, because
Hmm,
the main barrier that people don't do it because no one wants to really jump through those hoops. No one wants to actually, you know,
yeah.
put those things in place. Is expensive. It takes a lot of time.
Hmm.
You have to have great lawyers. You know, it's not easy. But I think now's the right time to do it.
Okay, cool. And something just crossed my mind. Um, Given the acceptability of digital assets, would Oasis be open to accepting payments in crypto, or you just stick to the good old dollar for now?
No, we can already take payments
Oh, okay, cool.
in crypto. We're
Hmm,
working we're working with a partner now which will allow you to invest with Bitcoin. So
hmm,
I think one of the one thing that is tricky is
Yeah.
what we'd call off ramping. So taking your crypto assets, selling it, and using that to buy like real property, like traditional property.
Mm.
Um, it's not easy, you know. When a lawyer see where you got the money from, you know, they want to, put up some red flags, or, you gotta pay taxes whenever you sell your crypto, X, Y, and
Yeah.
Z. Um, so being able to do it natively within the ecosystem makes it so much easier for everybody, essentially. But we essentially, do our distributions in stablecoin USDC. So
Yeah.
it's, what a stable coin is, but it's basically US dollar. So you can keep it within the platform. You can do what you want. Essentially, you can convert it into pounds or dollar or euro and invest.
Okay.
But yeah, essentially you can invest with crypto and fiat.
Okay, that makes sense. So, what's one upcoming trend in tokenized real estate that isn't getting enough attention that you think would be a game changer in the nearest future?
I think what we're doing with the utility part of tokenization will start to catch steam and build up. Um,
Yeah.
my hunch is that people want more, and people deserve more than just an
Yeah.
investment. You know, the capabilities are there within the technology to offer more than just an investment. So why aren't people doing it? You know,
Yeah.
so I think overall people's going to want, the access rights. People want to go and stay in the property. People's going to
Mm.
want to be able to vote with their tokens. People are going to want to be able to borrow on their tokens. So all these additional, utilities that we can provide, that we already provide, I think that'll probably be the next trend within tokenized real estate.
Okay, so this one is quite different. I mean, you've built multiple businesses in and out. What would you say is like your best investment and your worst investment moment?
Hmm.
Yeah, think about
Um,
that.
yeah, that's a tricky one. Um,
Yeah.
I would say my best investment moment is
Hmm.
really investing in myself.
Um,
Whether that's through courses, whether that's through a mentor or a coach, whether
yeah.
that's just, taking the risk and building a business. Um, the level of, I suppose, development that you will receive from making
Mm-hmm.
those mistakes, from failing at business, from, starting a business, from all those things, like, is invaluable. And over the years, those will compound into, you know, the powerhouse that I don't say you see here, but when you see like entrepreneurs in general,
Yeah.
like they didn't get there overnight. They got there from, I suppose, investing in themselves, whether it's through your habits, through what you eat, how you train in the gym, all those things. They all compound as investments. So I suppose I hope that answers the questions on the best
Yeah.
investment.
Definitely.
I mean, there's not an exact like money return on that
Yeah.
investment, but I think it's a millionfold wherever you invest in yourself. I would say worst investment is probably a bit more tangible. Um, would be property. It actually would be. It would be property.
Hmm.
Like I've like one deal, for example. Um, I wouldn't say it's a bad deal. Like still broke even, but compared to the emotional stress, like I think people don't put a monetary value on the toll it takes, emotionally, to have deals fall through, to have contractors or builders that you hire not, complete the job, or, people, tenants, not paying, like, so yeah, that's, I think that's more of an emotional toll, loss than a monetary loss. But yeah, it's been in property.
Okay. So, to your passions, like your personal life, aside when you're not doing business, when you're not just focused on the numbers and crunching it, what do you love to do for fun, like to ease the stress? I see you like to travel.
Yeah, I like to travel. For me, I like to, go on hikes, go on walks.
Mm,
Um, that's probably what I spend a lot of my spare time doing. Just a way for me to kind of clear my mind, to have my personal pep talks and those type of things. Um, yeah, and I suppose music, listen to live music.
Oh, nice.
Yeah, I would say that those are.
What genre of music do you appreciate?
I think luckily in Barcelona there's a really big like jazz scene. So if you like
Oh,
jazz
okay.
music, live jazz music, there's a lot of that happening. Um,
Nice.
so yeah, I'm lucky. I'm lucky for that.
So when did you move over to Barcelona? Have you been there? Like, how long have you been in Barcelona for?
3 years now, just over 3 years.
Oh, nice. You left us in the UK gloomy weather.
Yeah, I'm seeing
Oh,
it trend now. I'm seeing like all the news reports saying, how many people have left in the past, year and
yeah.
whatnot. I jumped ship a long time ago. I think I saw the iceberg coming long before everybody else. That's what it feels like anyway. But no, I actually wanted to leave the UK for a very long time before I actually was able to do so. I
Hmm,
think, being an entrepreneur it's not as easy. Because getting the visas and those things is it's not as straightforward as if you were working and you have a working situation here. And then it's how do you make money? Like luckily for me, being in property, it's something that's passive. So as soon as I was able to build my portfolio into a position where I can live off it, it was just a much easier decision to make.
amazing. So we've come to the second section of the pod, which is the Firecracker session. So this session, I throw questions at you and you just hit me back with the first answer that comes to your mind. Not much thinking required,
uh,
but I know
that's a
you're a
challenge.
detailed person, so you're just going to.
I'll try my best.
So fast forward 5 years from now, do you see traditional real estate investments becoming obsolete, or will it coexist with tokenization?
Will definitely coexist in 5 years. 50 years might be a different story, but 5 years it will
Okay.
coexist.
All right. So what's the best? Okay, I think we've answered this. Your best and worst investment decision. Let's look at the last one. For someone ready to dive into real estate tokenization, what's the single most important action they need to take today?
Research, I would
Research.
say.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah, research.
Research. And I was hoping you would say join your waiting list because you have, I think we'll put the link on the description so people can join the
Yeah,
list.
that's I would say that's second. Like I think it's important that you decide that it's for you,
Mm,
that you're ready for
yeah.
that.
Okay.
So yeah, once you looked into it and you're like, okay, let me get started.
Yes.
Sign up to the waiting list. Once you're approved, you can start investing.
Amazing. So how can we reach you, Ricardo? Because I know a
Um,
lot of people will be interested in learning more.
yeah, you can. I've got a YouTube channel, Ricardo
Mm,
C Johnson. I've got some videos on there on tokenization, so that's a good
okay.
place to learn. If you're on LinkedIn, Ricardo C Johnson on LinkedIn,
Okay.
Instagram, Rico C Johnson. Um, yeah, I think just search my name and I'll come up somewhere, and you can find me.
Definitely. I'll put all the socials in the description so they can easily get you. And I also put the Oasis link as well
Perfect. Thank you for
so
that.
people can reach out to you. So it's been an amazing one. I think this has to be one of my best sessions because I've learned so much. It's like you just opened my brain and put everything. And
Appreciate
it's
that.
when I saw blockchain, I'm like, okay, yeah, I need to speak to you because that's the future in it.
100%.
Everybody's moving into decentralized everything. So
100%.
and you're being a pioneer in this sector, and I really appreciate you for coming on the pod. It's been amazing speaking to you.
Thank you for
And
having
there
me.
you and there you have it, guys. Another amazing session with Ricardo Johnson. We're talking about real estate tokenization and the blockchain technology in this space. Till we come your way again, let us continue to turn knowledge into action and breaks into bank. This has been Breaks and Bank with Steph. Over and out. Bye.
I would say my best investment moment is
Hmm.
really investing in myself.
Hmm.
Whether that's through courses, whether that's through a mentor or a coach, whether
Yeah.
that's just, taking the risk and building a business, the level of, I suppose, development that you will receive from making
Mm-hmm.
those mistakes, from failing at business, from, starting a business, from all those things, like, is invaluable.